of our connection to Camp Nelson as a member of the 12th. That's how we got involved with Oldham County Historical Society.
That was my next question is, let's move to Oldham County.
Okay. I don't know how many events we've done there to support them over the years, but I can remember, and I think I still have the email, back in about 2015, I got an email from Nancy Theis, who's the director and president of the Historical Society. And she said, there is a woman by the name of Diane Booker who is a descendant of Alex Beaumont. Can you find some information on him? And I have access to the Fold 3 database, which is basically a military database.
Yeah.
So I could go in and see his service records. Well, I provided her with that information. That's something I've done for people over the years, and I didn't think any more about it. Then in 2019, I was up at Camp Nelson, and we were recording some things for the Kentucky Historical Society. And at the end of that, this name, Alex Beaumont, comes up again.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, I've heard that name before. And somewhere in between that time period, Diane Booker actually came to Camp Nelson and met me. I didn't remember the occasion, but asked also about information on Alex Beaumont. Well, it turns out that when you go into the historic African American cemetery in LaGrange,
yes, 2
headstones are at the entrance. A military headstone for Alex Beaumont and one for a man by the name of Rufus Holt. So in 2020, when I received the Morris Mount Roberts Fellowship, and discussing with Nancy, we thought, okay, with my background around the United States Colored Troops, and with the fact that we knew there were some from Oldham County that served, and then these 2 buried in the cemetery, that research around them would be a good project to undertake.
Yeah.
And that's how I got started on what I've been working on. Now, with COVID last year, it basically shut everything down.
Yeah.
I was only able to do what research I could do online, which kind of limits you, but still I was able to find some interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that I had found well before this was a document that listed every county in Kentucky. It listed the population of the county. It listed the number of white citizens, number of free blacks, the number enslaved, but it also went on in one of them to list the number that joined the Union Army.
Uh-huh.
And on that, for Oldham County, it only showed 50.
Yeah.
Now, I knew that was wrong. That document only was through December of 1864. And I knew there were a number of men that enlisted in 1865. So I said, okay, I'm going to find these men, all of them. And initially, working off of the 50 number, I could only identify about 40.
Yeah.
So for this project, I thought, okay, I can use Ancestry.com. I can do a search on where men were born, and I can find all these men from Oldham County.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wrong. Plan A was a huge failure. At the time, and I have not checked since, Ancestry did not have data on all the infantry regiments from Kentucky,
mm-hmm.
the United States Colored Troops, infantry regiments. And the bulk of the regiments formed in Kentucky were infantry. Now, I could get the 2 cavalry units and the 3 artillery, but none of the infantry.
Yeah.
So that meant go back to Fold 3. Now, there were 22 regiments formed in Kentucky. And I knew that a lot of men from Kentucky also enlisted in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me 23 regiments. Each regiment contains roughly 1,000 men.
Ooh.
Some of them. So I had to go through name by name,
yeah.
trying to identify where these men were born. If they were born in Oldham County, they went on my list. Mm-hmm. If they were born elsewhere, but credited to Oldham County, I put them on the list. And I was able to identify some 209 men by doing that effort. It took a lot of time to do it.
I would say so. That's if a regiment is 1,000. Whoo.
Yeah.
Good. That was good service on your part.
Well, it turned out to be very interesting mm-hmm. because, going in, I knew military age basically was 18 to 45.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to find out how many men younger than 18 and older than 45 were enlisted.
Yeah.
And I didn't write down the regiments for all of them, but when you find boys as young as 13 mm-hmm. and men in their 80s,
wow.
It opens your eyes.
Yeah. So I assume they just lied about their age in order to do it, or you think they were just accepted in?
Well, a couple of things that I think. Kentucky was not included in the Emancipation Proclamation. Mm-hmm. So it was still a slave state. We had Union officers in charge at various locations who were staunch abolitionists. And they knew if I can slip this young boy in or this old man in, I have freed another person. Uh-huh. And I'm striking a blow against slavery. So I think that had something to do with taking them in because it granted them their freedom. And I draw that a conclusion because of what I knew happened with the refugee camp in Louisville, that the commanding officer, General Palmer, would tell Thomas James, who was a minister that was in charge of the camp, go out and find a Union soldier, African-American Union soldier, and marry him to one of the women in the refugee camps so that she could be free.
Wow.
And we know there's information that says that, yes, that did occur at various times. So there were attempts to free people. One occasion in Georgetown, the officer, I believe, was from Illinois. He took a little colored boy who was a slave. When his owner came to claim him, he refused to give him up. The owner threatened to come back with force, so that when the regiment marched from Georgetown, Kentucky to Lexington, now there's no Confederate threat, they loaded their muskets, fixed their bayonets, and they marched out under arms. And he took this young boy with him. Now, the owner actually filed suit. The war was over before that suit was ever resolved. So that just tells you, and because of those types of incidents, the politicians in Kentucky said, okay, look, we have allowed these men to enlist, but we want officers over these men who are from Kentucky, because that would limit the interference with slavery within the state.
That's pretty interesting and pretty compelling stories there. The once you got these list of names down, and you said you had about, was it 206?
209.
209. What was the next step after that? You got all the um, soldiers. You got all the soldiers down. What did you do next?
We did a presentation um, to the Oldham County Society, a poster listing all the names, list basically when they were born, what regiment they went into, and then comments. If they were a slave and that information was available, then their owner was listed.
Mm-hmm.
The terms of how they got in the Army were also listed, whether they enlisted, whether they were drafted, whether they went as a substitute. In cases of those who were drafted or substitutes, typically if you enlisted, you were in for 3 years. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the others may have only been 1 year. So that kind of information was also presented. And then during the Juneteenth celebration that was held there, I did a presentation around gathering the information plus the list of names, because descendants of many of those men still live in the family in that area today.
Oh wow.
For example, Diane Booker, who was a descendant of Alex Beaumont, she has family members that are still there today. So we wanted those people to have that information in case they want to do research on their own. Now, Alex Beaumont is one that I'm still doing research on. Rufus Holt, who is the other man who is buried in the cemetery, I'm doing research on him, still doing him. And then two brothers, Nicholas and Ferdinand Kiger, who were born in Oldham County. I'm doing research on them. All of that research is not completed yet.
Mm-hmm.
Probably got more on Alex Beaumont, who was not listed on that list because he was not born in Oldham County. He was from Girard County. He got to Oldham County after the war.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rufus Holt also was not on the list because he was from Tennessee. And again, he came to Oldham County after the war. But I have pension papers for Alex Beaumont, Rufus Holt, and for Nicholas Kiger. Ferdinand did not have a pension paper. He did not apply for a pension. And he seems to have kind of disappeared from the historical record after a certain point in time. So my continued research is to pull together the stories of those men, but after getting into it, now there is a move on my part to expand.
Uh-huh.
For example, what was their role in education?
Yeah.
Well, we know right after the war, there was a freedmen's school established in LaGrange. And we know the first teacher or principal, whatever you want to call him, of that school was a man by the name of Henry Clay Mars. Henry Mars actually served in the 5th United States Colored Cavalry. He was an escaped slave from Simpsonville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be information on him. After the first year, Henry left to go teach school in the Lexington area, and his brother, Elijah P. Mars, took over the school. Henry and Elijah would eventually move to the Louisville area. They would form what is now Simmons College.
Oh.
So we start seeing the connection from an educational standpoint right after the Civil War that has continued through today.
Yeah, that's a really good connection, and which you mentioned this as well. Like it always happens. You start researching one thing, and you start getting things together, and then it expands, and you start looking at more stuff.
Right. Two other areas would be the social, and I'm trying to get information on the Freemasons
Yeah.
uh, from the area. We know there was a lodge in LaGrange. There was also one in Prospect. Were any of these men either members or instrumental in the formation of those lodges? Because the Masons were around during the war and were fairly big as far as an organization. Also in religion, we know that in a lot of the black churches, some of the early ministers were former soldiers.
Uh-huh.
Mars became a minister. William Simmons, who Simmons College is named after, was a Civil War soldier. Beargrass Baptist Church, which was formed by Elijah Mars and others, probably had 4 or 5 men that served as ministers of that church. So we will be investigating the churches in Oldham County. Did they have ministers or men who were in the United States colored troops that were instrumental in founding or constructing those churches?
You know, we've done some county histories so far on the podcast, like with Rockcastle and Garrett and Lincoln, the ones that I'm around, you know, and we've done some episodes on the churches of Rockcastle County. So that's really good. That's some really good stuff. So whenever you get all that worked out, you'll have to come back on and talk more in depth about some of those things, because it's so interesting. You find these churches or schools that have these 200 year connections to what's going on right now as far as being operational and those sorts of things. It's very interesting and cool, of course, you know, enjoying history as we do. That's kind of how it goes. So one question I did have, so enlistment you said was typically 3 years. So if they enlisted in 1865 or say 1864, you know, the war ends within that 3 years. Did some of them stay within the Army, or were they, how'd that go?
Some, depending on the regiment, mustered out. Most, you'll find that a lot of them from Kentucky would have mustered out in 1866, but some were sent west, and they did not get out until 1867. There are letters from some of those soldiers complaining about the fact that the war has been over. And now they are still serving in Texas and along the border with Mexico. One soldier wrote, "We are still here because we are Kentucky boys. And since we were the last to be allowed to enlist, we are going to be the last that they let leave." It was tough service. In fact, the youngest one from Oldham County that enlisted, he was sent down along the border. I believe he was down around Corpus Christi, Texas, when he drowned. Probably was going to be transferred somewhere else by ship. That's one possibility, but he drowned. He did not make it home from the war, even though he enlisted at a very early age. So what the Army did was, because of this feeling that, okay, there is going to be an invasion of Mexico, and from Mexico back into Southwest United States, we need a troop presence down along the border. And these black troops were sent because they were basically the last to join. And the fact of the matter is, they're United States soldiers. Now, we think about most of the white regiments that served in the Civil War, they were not technically part of the United States Army. They were voluntary units from the state. And that's
Oh.
why you see them designated First Kentucky, Second Ohio, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're state regiments. They don't have the numeric designations that the United States colored troop men had. The other thing that happened was after the war, many of the men wanted to stay in the Army. They took to that type of life. Mm-hmm. So you transition into the Buffalo Soldier period. That I actually, in my research, I went backwards from Buffalo Soldiers to United States colored troops. But the transition is actually the other way, from the Civil War period into the Buffalo Soldier period.
That is that's actually very interesting, because I had never really thought about that, but that's what it was. They weren't really, United States soldiers. They were Kentucky soldiers or Ohio soldiers, and then on the other side you'd have I guess Tennessee soldiers and so forth. That is really interesting and something that kind of seems obvious now that I know or I see the difference. But yeah, so after that, so you mentioned a few of the soldiers by name. Have you completed any research on any one soldier and the whole story of?
Yes, but not any of those from Oldham County. Now, Elijah Mars wrote his own biography, if you will.
Yeah.
So I know pretty much Mars's story.
Yeah.
There was also a man by the name of Peter Brunner who served in the 12th United States Colored Heavy Artillery. Peter Brunner never learned to read or write, but his story was written by his daughter as he basically dictated it to her.
Yeah.
So I know his life story. And there are a few others like that that I, maybe not their complete story, but I know quite a bit of their story, either from research that I've done or research that has been done in conjunction with, say, myself and others. Mm-hmm. I spent about 4 years with the Kentucky Humanities Council, their Chautauqua program, where I portrayed a Reverend Newton Bush, who was also a Civil War soldier, served in the Company E, 5th United States Colored Cavalry. So I know his story. Mm-hmm. So there are men that, yes, I know their story. And when I say that, I know basically their story from slavery up through later years in their life.
Yeah, there's not, hardly much record, I guess, prior to slavery that's out there, I guess, is there?
Well, no, because, and what we have to understand, although Kentucky had no actual law against educating African Americans at the time, the practice was you did not educate them. Particularly, you did not want them to learn how to write, because if they could write, they could forge passes, which mm-hmm. was a way for them to escape.
Yeah.
You might teach them how to read, particularly maybe to read the Bible, but you didn't want them writing. And that got Elijah Mars in trouble because he could do both.
And there's this is kind of a little bit more, but there's plenty of, Henry Bibb, and some others that, escaped and what they learned how to read and write, and that's exactly what happened. And I did a video on Henry Bibb a while back, just about his life, which was pretty interesting. Any other big stories, I guess, did you have, or have you kind of feel like you've covered most of the main ones? Or
to me, all the stories are big.
yeah, that's the hard thing. I mean, we could talk about them all.
Yeah, I've talked to some well-known authors of Civil War books, and
Hmm.
I've talked to them about events that happened. For example, the Saltville massacre, and why we don't hear much about it. And I was told that, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. Not that many men were killed, whatever, whatever.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, if I'm one of the black soldiers who was left on the battlefield when the Union retreated,
Hmm.
and I was used as target practice by the rebels, that would be a big incident.
That's a very big story. Yeah.
Uh, it's a big story. Uh, Fort Pillow, yes, we know about it, and I've been to Fort Pillow. That's an important story.
Hmm.
One of our members, of the original members of the 12th United States Colored Heavy Artillery reactivated, is a descendant of a man by the name of Peter Williams, who survived the Fort Pillow massacre.
Hmm.
Now, he was imprisoned for over a year, and his family did not know where he was before he was finally released and able to make it home. Uh, I know several descendants of men that survived that. So there are a lot of important stories, not just about Kentucky, but about the United States colored troops in general that people just don't know. Uh, People may know about and have heard about Robert Smalls, who captured the steamboat, the planter, and turned it over to
Hmm.
Union officials. But people don't know the story of how Smalls and his crew were treated after that was done. By maritime laws, they were supposed to receive a certain percentage of the value of the boat and its cargoes,
Yeah.
but they did not receive the right percentage because someone decided that's too much money for a N-word to receive.
Oh, yeah.
So there are all these stories that are out there waiting for people to flesh them out,
Hmm.
find them, but also to tell them.
Yeah.
Because these stories are the basis of the nation that we live in today. And I usually end my talks by saying I owe a great debt to the sacrifices of not just the soldiers, but the women as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
Uh, because of their sacrifices, their deaths, their bleedings, that I have the life that I'm able to live today. The other thing for Kentuckians, I say, I was born a slave.
Hmm.
And they say, what? And I'll say, well, I was 26 years old before Kentucky approved the 13th Amendment. So by Kentucky law, I was born a slave. And they look at me kind of funny, and they will usually tell me that's not right. I'll say, look it up.
It is, well, I think was it Mississippi? I think that it was like 2013. I think before they approved it. It's something like that. It's either Mississippi. I'm pretty sure it's Mississippi. Uh,
I think Mississippi, South Carolina, and I don't know if South Carolina has ever done it. At one point, I did know, but yeah, I mean, and when Kentucky did it, I mean, it was a symbolic act, but I just
yeah.
say, under state law.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's it's sad that that's the case,
Oh, what it points out to me is that we only know the history that is put in the texts that are used in school.
Yep.
And to really understand history, you have to find and understand not just the story that the victors are telling, but what's the story of those who lost.
Yeah.
It would be, I would love to read a Mexican version of the Battle of the Alamo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm sure it's going to be different than what we are told.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the sayings that we used to have was, if you want to know the truth, read the footnotes.
That's
Go find them, look up the information yourself, and then see what you think.
If you want to know the truth, you have to understand and know all sides of it.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned was it the 112th Infantry? Is that what it was?
No, I'm a member of the 12th Heavy Artillery.
Yes, okay. The 12th. How would somebody go about joining that if they could, or how does that all work?
They would need to just contact me for basic information. We usually have an annual meeting in January of each year. That's when we basically put out work on our schedule for the upcoming year. But if things come up during the year, we'll get together and either communicate by email, because most of the members, we live in different places across the state, or we will discuss unit business at an event that we might all be attending. We, in terms of actually firing an artillery piece, there are some limits age-wise as far as for how young you can be. We have taken young men below that age because there are things that they can do, and it is a good way for them to begin to learn the history. I've learned more Civil War history probably sitting around campfires.
Yeah.
As much as I have through research and reading books.
That's very true.
So if someone is interested, they can contact me.
Okay. And you on Facebook and all that, or?
I am on Facebook. The best way usually is to contact me by email, which is Robert, L as in Larry, B as in boy, 502 at AOL.com. If you send me an email, please put in your title, interested in 12th, or heard the podcast. Otherwise, if I don't know you, it's going in spam.
Well, you get plenty of spam anyway, so that's very, very understandable. Well, Mr. Bell, I've learned a tremendous amount that I did not know about. I'm sure the listeners in the audience have as well. And again, you will definitely need to come back another time and talk some more Oldham County history or the 12th Regiment history. As far as this podcast goes, as long as it's about Kentucky, we're ready to roll, or it fits. I hope the listeners have definitely learned something new and all that. Is anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you for the opportunity. Thank the Oldham County Historical Society for the support they've given me over the years, and I certainly have to thank Camp Nelson.
A great piece of Kentucky history that's just too often overlooked, and hopefully this will help bring some light to it, and we can get involved with some more Camp Nelson stuff as well. If there's nothing else, thanks again for coming on, and thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.